Your pet would like to have a word with you. In fact, your dog, cat, bird, horse, fish, even bearded dragon would like to have an entire conversation with you. But having that trans-species discussion is difficult without an interpreter, or go-between, a specifically skilled individual who's been communicating with our animal friends for more than 3 decades, bridging gaps in understanding, elevating relationships, building peace and harmony among all Earth's creatures. That person is Suzan Vaughn, the Animal Whisperer.
There's a place in Oregon where horses help humans stretch themselves emotionally and spiritually. It's called the Horse-Human Connection. I'm Suzan Vaughn, and in this episode, founder Ishe Abel interviews me about my education, my work as a mystic, and communicating with horses. Here is the Horse-Human Connection. Horses are special animals, and they have a historic relationship with humans that's all about service. They've helped us get from place to place, served soldiers in battle, tilled the fields, taught us patience, and they've been our healing partners in exchanging touch and communication. They're magnificently strong, emotionally connected, and deeply committed to their human caretakers. So when Ishe Abel from the Horse-Human Connection contacted me for an interview for her podcast, I said yes right away. I knew we were on the same wavelength when it came to respect for this magnificent mammal. And elevating our relationship with an animal I have great respect for. Ishe is what she goes by. And she started with a story about a friend of hers whose communication with the horse soon turned into a negotiation, a situation I find myself in on a daily basis.
Ginny has accumulated a lot of horses because she gets like a psychic hit of one that wants to be with her. But then when she gets there, they're bringing their friends. And, and Sarah's like, well, that's a really different, my friend says, that's a really different relationship. Now you're opening a door to just not like having light conversations, but you're in negotiations.
That's right. Animal communication is often about negotiation. It's a highlight of the whole thing. You want the cat to come in when it starts to get dark, and the cat is telling you, hey, I'm nocturnal, but I'll make the agreement. But the negotiation and agreement, it's a huge part of animal communication, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's been some of my experience too, even though it's acted out, like goats are only going to stay in an enclosed area because they can get out of anything if they want to, as long as there's food and water and they're happy. The minute you don't give them fair ups, or you give the horses grain and you don't give the goats grain, they're on the other side of the fence saying, hey, we had an agreement.
That's right. That's right. They'll keep the agreement whether you do or not.
I've noticed that about animals very much. So you also have a degree in psychology. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that fits into some of what you do?
Sure. Well, I do have a BA in psychology. I started along those lines in terms of my education. I wondered for a long time, how is psychology and communication going to come together? But certainly it comes together in every session that I do. And I also started my profession in the psychic realm by reading for people. So I started with people, and then I began to specialize in animals 10 years on. And it fits in the sense that by the time I was about 12 years old, people started coming to me for counsel, and I just had a knack for it. And it's a calling. So the calling for communication of many different types and the calling to give people good counsel came together in my current profession.
Do you feel like you see or experience some of that at a much deeper level than most people? Like aside even from the psychic stuff, and maybe you can't separate it necessarily, but like I'm just thinking about like from an early age, did you ever have the feeling that what I'm experiencing isn't what most people are experiencing? And how did you reckon with that?
It took me until I was an adult to figure that out. But in a sense, yes, because everything was so natural in that way for me. And that wasn't a lot of people's interest or proclivity, let's say. They weren't, I could have someone speak to me for 5 minutes and I kind of knew where they were coming from and what their life was like and what kind of challenges they were facing and uh, what they needed. And part of that is they needed just an ear. A lot
Mhm.
of times people just needed to be heard. They didn't need advice or things like what other people were giving them. They were annoyed by that and overwhelmed by that. What they needed was a listening ear. So some of those things came more naturally to me. And because I was a very profound listener, I came to understand what people's experiences were that were unlike mine.
When you first started talking to animals, was there, well, I guess because you had already worked with people, there probably wasn't like a feeling of disbelief, like, is this real? Was it, did you did you accept it immediately?
Not at all. I thought it was wild, crazy. People were judging me about it. They thought I was a nutcase. My dad asked me, why would you want to defraud the public like that?
Oh my.
Yeah, I did it for 10 years. I practiced without taking a dime because I needed to believe it was real. It took me a long time to find my mentor, Penelope Smith, to start reading all the books. I mean, I read all the books right away because the academic road was the natural road for me. So I read everything. And I thought, well, there really must be something to this. And then my own psychic counselor told me, wow, you come of good counsel. You could do this. So I began with little psychic fairs on the weekends while I was a broadcast journalist. So um, I I was just enjoying doing that for people. They seemed to be served, they seemed to be helped. That's what I was all about. I wasn't making a big money on it or anything, but it was very fulfilling for me to help them out.
Right.
And then people started coming through from the other side and the people sitting in my chair there were validating it. So after that, I wasn't really serious about it. It was just a thing I did on the weekends. And then some animals started coming through and I was like, animals, so that's different. I didn't grow up with animals. My mom was scared of animals. We didn't ever get to have any, you know? So that's what made it even more interesting for me that and it also made it very objective. I don't believe that every lab loves water. I don't believe that every cat doesn't want to get into the shower with you because some do.
Right, right. Can I ask you a little bit about guides? I recently came across something I was reading, I'm not even sure where, or maybe I was listening to it, and it talked about guides not always being ethical, like that there are maybe entities out there that are guides with their own agendas and not just there to help. Do you have any comments, experiences with that type of thing?
I'm very, very clear that I don't want any guides like that. And I believe the clarity of my intention guides that experience for me. I say soul level guides for the highest good of all concerned only. And I believe that because my intention is clear, that's all I get. Now, I do believe that there are guides who are here to guide you in the sense of, um, like, let's say you need a lesson in discrimination. You might get an animal communicator to work with you that's not real, that's not good, and that's telling you not all animal communicators are the same. In my experience, to be a good psychic counselor, or animal communicator. You have to have handled your own psychological stuff. You have to have been self-examined. You have to, in some ways, um, have gone through some difficult things and resolved those things, maybe have had counseling yourself. So I feel like if you don't do your own personal psychological work, you're not going to be good at this.
You're not going to have a clear lens to look through. It's going to be colored by your experiences.
In animal communication, as in any counseling profession, it's important to be clear in order to see and feel the issue of the people and animals seeking insights. Ishe believes that just by being in the proximity of horses, our mental health is improved through the animal's energetic field.
There's an emotional regulation that happens when we're with horses, and in a way, it feels a little bit like entering their culture, which is much slower than ours, much more present.
Yes, that's a very good point because animals are very present and they're often being instead of doing. So when the chatter, chatter, chatter of how people are come in and they say, well, what are these chickens saying? What are these roosters saying? Well, they're just being. They're just being here with us. They're not having major conversations or huge paragraphs of things. They're just being together and they're just being with us. So if we want to know something, we have to ask them a question. And then they're like, oh, hey there, you talking to me? I mean, they're mostly being. And they're very good at being. And at the end of life, they often say, there are people like, what can I do for him? Can I take him to the beach? Can I do? They're like, no, just sit with me on the grass. Just be with me. Don't do with me now. Just be with me. And this is very hard for people to, first of all, accept that they don't want to see the world in their last few moments. I guess that's why
Right,
we check everything off the bucket list quick. I
right.
don't know if that's like where people come from, but it's sometimes a foreign idea for them.
And yet, to me, the basis of spirituality is just being and being present.
That's right.
And they really are so much more advanced at that than humans.
They really are. Now I have the utmost respect for them to be able to do that. Not to mention, I mean, because I mentioned that I didn't really grow up with animals, the most amazing thing to me when I first began was how incredible they are, I just didn't have a real sense of how incredible they really are, how benevolent, how forgiving, how willing to learn, how willing to participate with us, how willing to cooperate. And to me, it's amazing that they get anything we want them to do, or because our minds are so scattered oftentimes.
People think, oh, it's so relaxing to go to the barn and see my horse. That's how I decompress from work. And the minute they walk through the barn doors where they've stalled their horse, they begin to relax like a Pavlovian effect. But my
Wow.
my theory is actually what's happened is as they come to see their horse and they're tense from work or their day or emotional, that spending time with the horse has helped them to regulate. And so now, so often that now all they have to do is to walk into the barn and they fall into that space. But that's my opinion, my theory.
I agree because I once had this little miniature horse friend, and just to go out and brush him was such a relaxing experience. And we didn't have a lot of major conversation. He was just there eating stuff and hanging around while I groomed him. And it was like, oh, wow, that was really nice.
It is. It is completely relaxing. And sometimes that's all it takes is a grooming session. And it's so helpful to people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
They help us in unseen ways, don't they?
They do. They
Yeah.
do so much. So I wanted to ask you a little bit. This may be something you're not terribly familiar with, but I have recently discovered that I'm on the autism spectrum. And so I have all of these questions about, because now I know my brain works differently than a lot of people's, but there's a lot of people that are discovering that they are
A
neurodivergent.
lot. Oh my gosh. It's like a trendy thing.
Yeah. And a lot of people I talk to are saying, well, yeah, me too,
Yes.
Um, but I have curiosity about psychic abilities and how our brains work and animal communication. And and what's available, because I have a sense that my experience of the world, I mean, I knew I was sensitive for a long time. Like being in nature, like just the beauty is so striking, it will take me to a different zone. Listening to music or looking at art or even a harsh comment from someone probably lands 10 times stronger on me than it does on other people. So I'm constantly trying to negotiate that. And obviously that makes me more sensitive to animals. Do you have any experience, opinion, even thoughts as we're talking, if you hadn't thought about it before, about autism and ESP and kind of a deeper connection?
Well, for one thing, it seems that people on the spectrum are more able to have a deeper sensitivity in terms of a communication coming through. I don't know if you're familiar with Temple Grandin's work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but Temple could understand that these little fluttering things on the fence were very disturbing to the cow. So she was able to really put herself into the cow's perspective and see that these little distractions were very upsetting. They were these little metal things to keep crows away.
Mm-hmm.
And the cows were very kind of annoyed and discombobbled by that. And so her ease of getting into the cow perspective is one thing that I could see that could be beneficial by a very sensitive person. And I'm sure autism is the same as the highly sensitive person that we used to say. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are highly sensitive people. Well, then you can easily perhaps get into a different perspective and feel it from that perspective. And that was her talent. And I expect that's one of people who consider themselves autistic or who are diagnosed in that sense too. They experience the world through perhaps more pictures
Mm-hmm.
than words. And pictures is where our animals go. They go to the picture in your head. So, for example, if you're telling the dog, don't jump on me, while having pictures in your head of the dog jumping on you, the dog will most likely go to the picture that's in your head. And this is one of the places where I find it amazing they understand what we're trying to do at all, because sometimes our pictures are so incongruous with what it is we're saying we want.
Well, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for meeting with me and doing all the Zoom things. I've loved this. I've loved getting to know you a little bit better, and I think it's some really good information for people to hear on the podcast.
It was my pleasure, and I so honor the work that you're doing with the horse-human connection. It's very
Mm.
inspiring, and this kind of cooperation with our animal friends is what I'm all about too. So high five, sister. Ishe asked me if I was part of the quiet revolution, and I surely am. This quiet revolution is about changing our ways of being with our animal companions from domination to cooperation. We're moving to a new era of listening to what they have to say and treating them with the respect they deserve. The quiet revolution is getting louder and louder, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
For more episodes in the series, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. To learn all about Suzan Vaughn and her services, visit her website at animalwhisperer.net. Be part of the community by subscribing to her Facebook page, animalwhisperer.net. Then sign up for Suzan's newsletter to enjoy more of her fascinating animal-human communication stories. So, until next time, join Suzan as she talks to the animals on The Animal Whisperer.